Okay, thank you for being here today, everyone. And I'd also like to thank the members of the Shared Pulpit Workshop, which was led by Reverend Christian, and they all helped with the construction of this sermon. And I'll also mention they're all here today helping out with the service. And I want to thank another special friend who reviewed this document as well. Many years ago, I was teaching remedial English classes for sailors who wanted to improve their reading at the naval base in Rota, Spain. One session, there was a student with a southern accent who impressed me because every day he cleaned up the mess the previous class had left. And because he was stuck on the difference between adding an S apostrophe, and adding an apostrophe S to a noun. One day, he turned in a paragraph that I wish I had saved. I don't remember the specifics, but in every way, the teachers are trained to evaluate writing, sentence structure, grammar, organization, spelling. It broke all the rules. By those standards, it read like a jumble. But at the heart of it, a clear and beautiful message shined. From a school point of view, it needed to be fully rewritten, but I left it because any correction would dilute its power. This young man communicated eloquently and effectively, even though he had never learned standard English. In fact, linguistic case studies verify that speakers of the Black vernacular, his dialect, are often perceived as ignorant, rude, and lazy by educational, legal, and medical institutions. Yet, linguistics tells us that Black vernacular is not an incorrect version of so-called proper English. It is a distinct language with its own rules for grammar, syntax, phonology, and semantics, with full expressive possibilities. All of that was revealed in his paragraph. At the bottom of it all, he was just like everyone else who loves his grandma, who values neatness, and who wants to do well. He was in the class to improve his position in the Navy. That, after all, took ambition. If we only took account of all the differences between him and me, and possibly anyone here, the list would be long. Frankly, until I read his heartfelt paragraph, I thought he was a nice kid who I had nothing in common with. I was wrong. We were united already, though I didn't know it, in our humanity, in our love for our family, in wanting to be in a clean environment, in wanting to succeed. After I realized all those invisible connections, then I could celebrate and appreciate his differences from me, his voice, his writing, his manner of communication, his job, his experiences. I realized that he and I, were alike in that we both embodied common values like thoroughness, helpfulness, sincerity. Here's another encounter I had a while back. I attended a group discussion where I was the newcomer among 4 or 5 members who knew each other well. One of their cats had just died, and they spent the better part of an hour discussing their grief. They agreed that no one without a cat could understand. I listened quietly, my mind turning. What if someone had a dog die? Would they understand? Contrast that scene with a sermon I once heard at a UU church. The speaker talked about going back to work after her mother had died. A co-worker expressed condolences, saying, "I understand how you feel. My cat died recently." At first, the woman was furious. The loss of her mother could not be compared to the loss of a cat. Later, she realized that she and the workmate had experienced something similar. The colleague was reaching from her own experience of loss and grief. They could feel compassion for each other because they had both experienced one of our human emotions without quantifying it. Excuse me. Another sermon at that same church comes to mind. The sanctuary was wrapped in silent awe as the speaker talked about his time in Vietnam, specifically a day when his squad was going through pockets of fallen enemy soldiers. He told of seeing photographs of mothers and girlfriends, of seeing letters folded in their pockets, the same kind of thing he himself carried. In a moment of epiphany, he realized that these so-called enemies were not his enemies. They were just like him. They were sent off to fight a war. They didn't want to be there. They were missed at home, and they dreamed of going home to a family just like he did. They weren't Viet Cong or communists anymore. They were human beings who didn't want to or deserve to die in that war, just like he didn't. Once he accepted the full humanity of those Viet Cong soldiers, then the visible differences of language, country, uniform, and so on became irrelevant. You do not want to wage war on someone you identify with. Indeed, recognizing and acknowledging the unifying link among all peoples, their innate humanness, is a moral imperative that can lead to a more just social and economic policy and practice. The World Happiness Report of 2020 investigated why the Nordic countries continually rank among the happiest in the world. The report concluded that one key reason is social cohesion. From the long discussion, I'll quote this little bit. On a cultural level, arguably the most important factor is to generate a sense of community, trust, and social cohesion among citizens. A divided society has a hard time providing the kind of public goods that would universally support each citizen's ability to live a happier life. In a divided society, people also tend to be less supportive of various welfare benefits because of worry they would benefit the other groups as well. When people care about each other and trust each other, this provides a much more stable base on which to build public support for various public goods and welfare benefit programs. Back to me. Surely you recognize the United States as such a divided society where often receiving various educational, medical, or other public benefits may depend on proving not only your need, but your deservingness. Our divided society manifests itself in countless ways, which you all know about, including exorbitant CEO salaries, school dress codes that are punitive to girls, and gerrymandering for votes, and many, many more. One anecdote to this division comes from the Baha'i faith. The religion's foundational principle states, we belong to one human family. They teach, this is a quote, Acceptance of the oneness of humanity demands that prejudice, whether racial, religious, or gender-related, must be totally eliminated. And they say, another quote, "The oneness of humanity, however, does not imply uniformity. Rather, the Baha'i writings affirm the principle of unity in diversity. More than the mere tolerance of differences or celebration of superficial aspects of diverse cultures, the diversity of the human family should be the cause of the abiding love and harmony." In other words, as a Baha'i puts it, we are all the leaves of one tree. Along those lines, we can look at unity in terms of cultural differences. When I taught English to speakers of other languages, I used to display a picture of a cultural iceberg in my office. The top visible bit of the iceberg includes food, dress, arts and crafts, holidays. These are the surface aspects our society takes in celebration as a way to honor diversity. Of course, this is fun and awesome. But as you know, the greatest part of the iceberg is invisible. That includes cultural norms such as family roles, relation to authority, beauty ideals, attitude towards school and work, gender roles, humor, notions of modesty, and so on, many, many. These invisible aspects can cause lots of misunderstandings, and it's where conflicts arise. Using one of my own experiences, in the first month I got to Rota, Spain, I bought a dress at a tiny boutique in the small town. They fitted it for alterations, which of course surprised me, and told me to come back later to pick it up. I asked for a receipt, and they said I didn't need one. So we went back and forth, me insisting in broken Spanish that I should get a receipt, because we always get a receipt. Finally, they gave me a scrap of paper. When I returned later, as soon as I stepped in the doorway, they retrieved my dress. No receipt needed. So I learned about trust in business practice, and I don't know what they thought about this American, but I kept learning like that for 3 years. If I hadn't, I'd have turned into someone who believes that the way we do things or the way we think is the way, and that any other way is inferior. This can be a dangerous notion. So, celebrating diversity may lead to tolerance, which is good, but tolerance is not the same as acceptance. Acceptance depends on a deep and abiding sense of unity with all humanity. Starting with that, a sense of unity with all humanity leads to authentically respecting differences and honoring diversity. In that light, I'd like to see our social institutions, of which many of us are a part, of law, health, education, religion, and government, relate to clients based on a sense of our unity in our common and innate humanity, even as we, as individuals, appreciate whatever differences there are among us. Let us create a world in which recognition of our humanity reinforces our respect for diversity in all its forms.